Well, thank you very much, Dennis, and here we are roasting under the television lights in the crystal candelabra in Claridge's. I suppose it's a very special occasion for several reasons, one of which is that somebody in this room is going to get £5,000 in a few minutes, and most people don't know who that is yet. It's also unusual for novelists to be in such sumptuous surroundings, in front of pink candlesticks, silver candelabra, eating a marvellous menu, when you think that the average earnings of writers from writing is less than £1,000 a year, which is why the public lending right filibustering of that bill in the House of Commons the other week was so outrageous as far as writers were concerned, because that would have helped a little bit. It's also unusual in showing a conjunction between industry and the arts, which doesn't happen very often in English life, but Booker McConnell, a firm which does everything from food to engineering, gives £5,000 a year for the best British or Commonwealth novel written in that year. It also lays on a dinner like this, and it pays 3 judges to judge those novels. And this year the judges are Francis King, himself a distinguished and excellent novelist, Walter Allen, and Lady Mary Wilson. I'll be talking to Lady Mary Wilson later, and to the eventual winner. Like all literary prizes, the Booker's had a buffeting. It's had an uneven career, and people claim that the best writer hasn't always won, as usual, as they do from every prize from the Nobel Prize downwards. But what's been unusual about this is that it's happened in England, where we're not used to controversy over our prizes here. It's all supposed to be garden fate tidy, but it hasn't been. And what's also unusual is that the dust that's been kicked up has nearly always been thrown in the eyes of the sponsors. There have been small things, like one man who won it was accused of not writing a novel at all, but producing a collection of short stories. One person on the shortlist was accused of being there only because a relative of his was on the judging panel. But more importantly, when John Berger won the prize for his novel G, in his acceptance speech, he lambasted Bookers, and he attacked them for their practices and policy in the West Indies, and he gave half the money, £2,500, to the Black Panthers to support, he said, the struggle which aims to expropriate all such enterprises as Booker's Caribbean Sugar. That was in 1972. In 1973, J.G. Farrell won the prize, and in his acceptance speech, he lambasted the royal family, the public schools, and overpaid company directors, but he took the prize money. On another occasion, in another year, Malcolm Muggeridge resigned from the judges' panel because he thought that the books were too sexy. When it started off with 66 novels a few months ago, the shortlist is now down to 6, and these are the 6 from which the winner will come tonight. There's André Brink's novel, An Instant in the Wind, R.C. Hutchinson's novel, Rising. Mr. Hutchinson unfortunately died a few months ago, but his novel was picked before then. It's in. Brian Moore, The Doctor's Wife. Kingfisher Lives by Julian Rathbone. David Storey's Saville. And William Trevor's novel, The Children of Dynmouth. So in a sense, place your bets. And some of those authors are here tonight. In fact, in this room, there's a fair cross-section of the dreaded metropolitan London literary establishment or conspiracy, whichever way you look at it. There's Norman St John Stevens, former Tory Minister for the Arts. There's a publisher, Graham C. Greene, who's the co-executive with Michael Foote of the Crossman Diaries. There's Margaret Drabble, a novelist and critic, and she's also a biographer, written a biography of Arnold Bennett, and she's sitting next to Michael Holroyd, who's written biographies of Lytton Strachey, Augustus John, and is now working on one on George Bernard Shaw. It's full of literary editors, Peter Lewis, Bill Webb, Ian Trewin, David Holloway, Peter Grosvenor, and also of publishers, Max Reinhardt, Geoffrey Simmons, and Tom Mashler from Cape, who kicked off the whole idea of a Booker Prize, and he's sitting next to Bernice Rubens, a previous prize winner, and other previous prize winners, and included Vidya Naipaul and Ruth Prower Jabvala. The top table was Professor Roy Fuller, who's a poet and head of the Arts Council Literature Panel, which is in the unenviable position of having less to give out to more. There's also Michael Caine, who's the chief executive of Booker's. There's Francis King, one of the judges, as I said. Sir Victor Pritchard's there. Martin Gough, who's in charge of the National Book League, which runs this event. And Lady Mary Wilson, who'll be joined later by Sir Harold Wilson. I spoke earlier to Lady Mary Wilson about judging this event. Lady Wilson, were you glad to be chosen as a judge for the Booker Prize?
Well, I was most honoured to be chosen. I thought it was a great pleasure to me to be on the committee. I think I was chosen because I'm a novel reader rather than a writer, and I might bring a sort of fresh view to the judging.
You certainly had plenty to go at. You read 66 novels over
Yes, we did.
Over the last few months. Did they have anything in common? Did you say the British novel is like this, could you say?
I should have said that they're very imaginative. This is quite new, and quite a lot of fantasies in them, and dreams, and a certain amount of witchcraft, which is a departure, I feel, from the old type of novel.
Did anything depress you particularly about the novels you read?
Well, I must confess that many of them seem to be written to a sort of pattern. I had a little book in which I wrote notes about each novel, and I put PD on a lot of them, which are physical descriptions, which you didn't seem to be able to get away from. 4-letter words, rape, violence, even cannibalism, and this seemed to be, in many cases, considered to be a necessary ingredient, and I don't think it is necessary for a good novel.
And this was in a great number of the novels, is it?
In a great number, yes.
And conversely, did anything particularly elate you or delight you about the book?
I was very pleased, as I say, with the originality of so many of the plots. Some of them seem to fade out in the middle, but then one mustn't be too critical, knowing how difficult it is to write.
What do you look for in a novel?
Well, I looked a novel up in the dictionary, and it said it's a continuing narrative with a plot, and I do like to have a plot, and I do like to have a story that has a beginning and a middle and an end. That is what I do look for, and of course a certain spiritual quality.
And sufficient of the novels you think had these qualities this time?
Well, most of them did, shall we say.
The 66 novels is a lot to read in a short time. How did you set about the selection and the judging?
Well, we all read them all, and then when we met, we had several meetings, and we discussed the various novels that we'd come across. They came in batches, and sometimes I hadn't sufficiently read one of the other judges liked very much, and vice versa, so we said, oh yes, well, we'd go back and read this, and this again, and gradually we narrowed it down to a short list this way.
Did you find yourself in disagreement with Francis King and Walter Allen very often at all?
Well, we had a sort of system of voting, and naturally we didn't all agree on the same things. I think the difference was that I was, as I say, judging as a novel reader, and they were judging more on the technical aspect of the novels, how they were written. I never think about that when I'm reading a novel. I just read the story, and but gradually we came to a unanimous decision in the end, naturally.
Did you have a unanimous...
Well, a sort of cabinet decision, a majority decision, shall we say.
Useful that there are only three of you.
Yes, yes.
Did that mean sometimes that a novel that you particularly liked, did you ever get voted down over a novel that you particularly liked, or what?
No, strange enough, it didn't happen like that. Well, we came with fixed ideas, and they were different sometimes, but in the end, having discussed it all and given way and so on, it was okay. We all were happy with the result.
One of the things that the novel's done in the past, the British novel particularly, is to sort of bring us news about the society we live in. You mentioned fantasy and imaginative plotting and that sort of thing. Having read these novels, do you think you have a better idea of the society that we live in now?
I must say I was considerably surprised. I don't know whether the novels represent the society that we live in now. I should have said they weren't particularly like the novels of the 30s. They weren't particularly on the everyday scene. As I say, they were more imaginative in many ways. Maybe the use of continual 4-letter words are meant to be our society today. Well, I don't know about you, but we don't use 4-letter words in my home. Nor in the homes of any of my friends.
So in that sense you didn't look very realistic at all. No, no. Was there anything that you felt that the novel had abandoned? Did you feel that they weren't as interested in characters as the novels that you admire, the classical novelists that you admire?
No, I didn't feel this. I think the characters were very well drawn, and you could see them. They were three-dimensional. No, I thought those were very good in the main.
Who's your favourite novelist?
You mean living or dead?
One of each.
Strangely enough, I realise I don't read an awful lot of new novels. I read a lot of classics and old favourites. Naturally, my favourite writer, dead, is Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights. I think that is the ultimate novel for me. And of the present-day writers, I'm very fond of Mary Renault. I think she writes most beautifully and most evocatively of the past, and very, very well researched.
Do you think that the experience of having read this batch of British novels of today will encourage you to read more contemporary fiction, or do you think you've had enough of it for a while?
Oh, no, I'm sure I should carry on reading novels that are written now, because it has been extremely interesting experience for me, and I should probably read more novels now that are being written than rather than falling back on all the old favourites, I hope.
Lady Wilson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so, with the dinner over, what could be called the high moment of the evening has arrived with the speeches. Francis King, himself a novelist, spoke for the judges, reading from Walter Allen's prepared speech. Walter Allen is ill. He's unable to attend. And before announcing the winner, Walter Allen sought a definition of the novel and plumped for Dr. Johnson's judgment of Alexander Pope. New things made familiar, and familiar things are made new. And then Francis King went on from there.
The familiar, the quotidian, the workaday, the ordinary isn't, of course, the only province of the novelist. That, indeed, is shown by the half-dozen novels that compose this year's shortlist. You could scarcely find 6 novels more different one from the other. But in every one, and it doesn't matter where the main emphasis lies, the new is made familiar and the familiar is made new. Above all, perhaps, in the novel that is the choice for this year's Booker Prize, I find it fascinating and ironical that a year ago the chairman of the judges, Angus Wilson, having sharply condemned too many of the entries for encouraging that very standard of narrow London middle-class sophistication, which all of us who judged this year felt to be one of the worst banes of the contemporary English novel, went on to condemn the dull and priggish self-consciousness of the rather less number of working-class novels, of Pitt Life, for example. Very few working-class novels were submitted this year, but one that was certainly a novel of Pitt life, or of life dominated by the pit. How dull. Well, it happens to be this year's prize-winning novel, David Storey's Saville. In it, Storey doesn't hesitate to enter into competition with one of the greatest of modern masters, one of the most famous of 20th century novels. Despite this, the new and the familiar are fused in pristine freshness. Among other things, David Storey's Saville reminds us, if we need reminding, that one meaning of the word novel is new.
And now David Storey is presented with the 1976 Booker Prize, the statuette and the £5,000 by Michael Caine.
Well, if I could, first of all, give you this emblem. And then also an envelope with the prize in monetary form in it. But above all, I would like to congratulate you and acclaim all that you've done for all of us, I think, by the work of hours or months or however much you did on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, I've just been told that the culprit or the victim is supposed to make a speech, which I didn't understand was a usual formality. Authors usually being very modest characters. The moment you let them loose in public, they go mad, you see. Because the last time I was in the Booker, in fact, the only time I was in the Booker list the last time, it went to the wrong novel, of course. It went to John Berger, and you see what happened there. He not only gave half the money away, he made a political speech. Well, our eminent politician is...
Sorry, you have to go.
Yes.
Yes.
No, I know the feeling. But I noticed also Lord Donaldson, our brilliant Minister of Arts, is also conspicuously absent. I take it, who's let the magnificent Public Lending Rights Bill flash through his hands. There are those people who wish to emulate Lord Eccles, but I think that's a little bit ridiculous. But we have his we have his equally brilliant counterpart here, who I've just converted to total conviction to comprehensive education. And you'll know that he is a hypocrite if he ever goes against that conviction. So watch him and his pals. But I've nothing to say about literature because my superstition about artists and writers is they should keep their mouths shut, and one or two other people too. But as I say, they usually go mad and say ridiculous things, and I think artists are as big an idiot as anybody else in terms of their private view of society and life. I don't wish to keep you too long from your La Mousse de Café Amandine. It sounds very exciting. And since it's all been televised as well, I've been told we're in a hurry. So on the whole, it's a rather brilliant combination, you might say, of the ridiculous and the sublime. But I appreciate the cheque. Because the business I am in, the checks you get don't often, well, the signatures are usually in doubt. But thank you very much indeed to the judges, and thank you too for giving so much time to literature in general. I think it must be extremely tedious to read 66 novels. And I think novel reading is a very hard business in any case. Not quite, it's a bit longer than poems, isn't it? You can write poems a bit quicker, can't you? No, I think poetry comes out a bit faster. But thank you very much indeed. I won't keep you any longer from your pudding. Thank you.
So David Storey's won the 1976 Booker Prize award, the statuette and the £5,000. He's not new to awards. His first novel was This Sporting Life in 1960, followed by Flight to Camden, and they won the John Llewellyn Rhys Memorial Prize and the Somerset Maugham Award. His plays, which include The Contractor and Home and The Changing Room, have won the New York Critics' Best Play of the Year Award 3 out of 4 years, the Evening Standard Drama Award, and so on and so forth. What do you intend to do with this £5,000 is the first question that you've got to ask somebody who's just won that sort of money.
You have?
Yeah.
I'd probably use it to write a novel, since I don't think anyone makes a living writing novels now. So, I mean, I subsidize writing novels by writing plays, you could say. So this will help to write another novel, I should think.
You really do still have to subsidise your novels?
Yes. Do you?
Yeah, but I'm surprised with you. I mean, you're more successful and almost a household name as a novelist, and I'm surprised that...
Oh, and come now, Melvin.
You are. Yeah, you are. As a novelist.
Well, it doesn't sell novels, that I don't think. I mean, perhaps this award may make some difference.
And you actually write your plays as an act of subsidising the book in order to make money to go on?
No, they don't, but without writing plays, I wouldn't have the time and the finance to actually write novels, particularly one of this length, which is taking 10 years to write. I think it would be impossible.
It seems to most people, and it seems to me, and an enormous amount of time to spend on one book. Could you in any way describe how you put in the 10 years on writing Saville?
I think it was done in 3 main patches, but I think it needed that time to formulate the experience of someone growing up over, I think it's about 25 years of their early life. And there's a little bit also about the life of the community before that, before the main character's born.
When the father comes in, do you want to... I think we should say what the novel's about. Would you like to say?
No, I have no idea what it's about. You better tell them what it's
Well, the outline of the story. Shall I do it or will you do it?
No, you do it.
Well, it's set in a village which becomes a town in Yorkshire. It's about a man who moves to a new place as a miner and has 4 children, the first of whom dies, Andrew, the second of whom, Colin, is the protagonist of the book, and the two younger brothers are also figure very large in the book, and Colin's progress from a child to a man through school, grammar school, sport, university, a love affair, college, a love affair, and then leaves for London at the end of it.
Yes. Well, that's quite good.
You think that's sort of what, 6 out of 10?
Shows you've read it and you've been educated.
Yes, I've read it in the time between you were awarded it and I wrote it.
Oh, that's good.
506 pages in 2 seconds flat. What would you say the main themes of the book were?
I don't know. I hesitate to theorise about what the book's about in that sense. But, I mean, basically it is about a boy growing up in the 1940s and 50s in this country. So it's very much about a particular time and place. And it's also about the life of a particular community, a kind of community which may no longer exist. And the effect of the community on an individual living in it, and the individual's effect on the community in which he lives. And in the end, his taking leave of it in his complete alienation from his background and taking off into, well, whatever he takes off into.
Yeah. You're inside the novel itself. You, not as the author, but Colin, the protagonist, the hero of the novel, resists ideas of himself being part of the working class, or the part of the world he comes out of being called working class. I think he says, I don't know what working class means. It isn't meaningful enough for me to talk about it. Is this your attitude? Do you share that or not?
I don't know whether it's mine, but I think the dilemma of the character is someone who's come from a very markedly working class background and knows he can't stay there because education is taking him out of it. It's given him a detachment and a kind of a spurious enlightenment, which doesn't relate to working class life.
Why is it spurious enlightenment?
Well, it's spurious to the extent that it actually, he can't relate it or apply it to the life of a working class community. It makes him, in other words, a middle class character. And he also finds middle-class life unlivable. And if you like, the dawning horror of the novel is his realization that all society is bourgeois.
Marx, that's what Marx said, isn't it?
And, yes. And the fact that in order to escape that, he's got to escape everything.
And you think that, in a sense, by escaping it, he loses himself?
He loses a great deal. What he gains, it's hard to put your finger on. Perhaps he gains by becoming an artist or a poet, as the book suggests he may become. But someone certainly who's alienated from society, which I think most artists are now.
Another thing that's in your book, which again is said explicitly several times, but it's also implicit in the book, is that working class mining life is somehow become an anachronism. It was a little, and you don't use the word little, but you imply a small, almost excrescence on the working body, on the excrescence of the peasant society, which is now gone and can be looked at almost as a museum piece. Is this something you feel?
I don't know whether it's gone, but it implies that the working class as a class are a very recent phenomenon, and just how long they will last as a class, in sort of, if you like, convention or Marxist terms, is a very debatable point. In fact, the aspirations of the working class are clearly towards the middle class, rather than in this country, rather than towards a revolutionary ideal, which again is the dilemma of the character. And this particular community is, as you say, is very homogeneous in a way that industrial communities perhaps no longer are. And I think the novel perhaps may be interesting to readers in that sense, that it does have a very strong sense, almost a 19th century sense of community, and of people being shaped by the community in which they live and feel enveloped by, and then coming out of it rather like something out of an egg.
You use the word mould, and you point out, again explicitly in the book, that Michelangelo never left, or hardly left Florence, Shakespeare never left London, Rembrandt never left Amsterdam, and yet they were great artists, and that is implied criticism of Colin, who's going to leave Saxton as it is.
It's implied, but it's very curious that all the great literature of the 20th century has invariably been done by exiles. If you look at Joyce, or D.H. Lawrence, or Wyndham Lewis, or Henry James, it's a rather curious phenomenon that all of them, it's all the literature, at least English literature, Anglo-American literature, the main contributions have been done by exiles. Why that is so, I don't know. But it seems a very marked feature of 20th century English literature.
But nowadays there's hardly anywhere to be exiled in, is there?
Well, that's the dilemma, isn't it, for people like you and I?
I mean, there's nowhere to go.
Where do we run to?
Where do you want to run anywhere?
I think it isn't run, it's more or less you've got to actually escape.
Why have you got to escape?
I think the restricting and compromising pressures of that kind of society are so forbidding and so destructive that you've got to escape them.
Why are they so destructive, do you think?
Why are they so destructive? I think I've no idea. I don't know why they are.
You just feel that if you had stayed in Wakefield, that you wouldn't have written novels?
I don't think I could have written if I'd stayed in Wakefield. I don't think anybody could have written if they stayed in Wakefield. I don't think you can stay in the community. Why all these people leave, I don't know. But it's something to do with the detachment required to write about your own environment, for one thing. And it's also probably something to do with the fact that all society is bourgeois. And the artist, if he's got to succeed, has got to resist that in some way.
How do you resist it at the moment, then?
I think probably by going quietly mad.
What do you mean, that?
I don't know how you resist it. It's sort of an internal mechanism. I mean, I live in a no man's land, if you like. I know you feel you don't, but I mean, I feel living in London is a no man's land. It's a complete vacuum. And I think it's a vacuum that you exist in artistically, or that I live in it artistically. And I can't see any way of getting out of it, except by writing works of art, writing plays and novels.
And so you would say that writing plays and novels and writing this novel was a way to talk to yourself, in a way?
Well, you're not talking to yourself. If it's any good, you're talking to everybody. But, I mean, it's a way of formulating the experience you've been through and trying to give it a kind of credibility which it didn't possess at the time.
Yes. And does this give you a feeling of freedom or satisfaction or achievement? What does it give you? Or just relief?
I don't know. I mean, artists are a bit eccentric, aren't they? It's something you have to do.
Thank you very much.